Begin the current daf Masechta Shabbos of Kuf Chafei. Begin the top line of the Amud, where we continue the halachas of previous daf regarding the broken vessels as they apply to the laws of muktzah, which that was the theme of our previous Mishnah regarding shivrei kelim, regarding their muktzah or non-muktzah status. Ashis corresponds to Bekalzik and Cheskot Torah Anytime Daf Achayim. Some of these we're going to be discussing in today's daf are three ways to understand a machlokes between Rameh and Yehuda regarding the broken pieces of an oven. Rameh says not muktzah, Yehuda holds it is muktzah. It's going to be a little bit complicating. However, the Gemara is going to attempt to understand what that machlokes is. Another idea we're going to speak about in today's daf are when you have a muktzah item that's attached to a non-muktzah item. Does it become part of the kli and then lose their muktzah status? So if you have a rock, let's say, in a gourd, or you have a vine on a jug, what's the halacha of that muktzah item? Additionally, we're going to have a machlekes regarding when you want to take a muktzah item and make it into a kli and no longer a muktzah item, do you need to have a maisa, a significant action, or you don't really need such a significant act to make it a non-muktzah item? Additionally, at the end of the daf, we can discuss, may one add to a structure, and that might depend on, let's say you have a window shutter, if it's attached, even if it's attached, if it's hanging on the floor, or do you need to have it attached and not even hanging on the floor to add it onto the building? Some important terms of concepts we're going to be discussing are what we've mentioned in the previous stuff regarding the malachtan. If you have, let's say, a jug that broke, but it's still able to be done with its a work, or do you need its work? Main malacha, that you could just do some function for it not to be muktzah, or does it have to be main malachtan still to be able to be used somewhat in the form that it was able to be used before it broke? Also, the term of basis of dava aser, which is if you put a muktzah item on top of something before Shabbos, and you put it there deliberately, then the base itself actually becomes the muktzah item itself as the halacha of basis of dava aser. The concept of oil arai, which is if you're making something as a temporary structure, regarding its status of the malacha of baina on Shabbos. So begin the current daf, Masechta Shabbos of Kuf Chafei. First, we round off the sugya from the previous daf regarding certain cases of shivrei kelim, of broken vessels, regarding its muktzah status. Amar Baham Duri Amar Shmuel. He says, kremius, which are thin strips, shal machzelis of a mat, which got detached from an old mat, mutal tatlam b'Shabbos. You're allowed to take those strips and move them on Shabbos. So that the question is, my time, well, what's the reason? Isn't that like something that's not it's like noilet, it's not something that's significant? It should be like a broken thing that has no utility? That Amar Ravi says, Barham Duri Asbroli. Barham Duri explained to me the reasoning for this halacha is that machzeles gufal ma'chazi. What is a mat useful for that you could move that on Shabbos? Is l'chsuyi be'afra, is to cover the earth, either like Rashi says to cover excrement, or that the earth doesn't rise. In Talmudic times the floors were made out of earth, so you don't want the earth to rise. That's the utility of a mat. Haninami, when these strands of the mat come undone, they are also chazan l'chsui beitanefis. They're also usable to cover dirt, so it really has the same function as the mat itself, to cover things. So therefore it's not noilet, it's not anything different, it's the same thing, and therefore it's not a muktzah item. Similar type of a discussion, Amar B'zei Amar Rav, he says, shiari, the leftovers of parezmias, of like a talis, of a cloak. So you have these strands of a cloak, here the halach is aslan talpim Shabbos. Unlike the mat, here the strands of the talis, it's forbidden to move it on Shabbos. So on that Abai, he qualifies this and he says, because we're talking about we're talking about a swath, a patch of the garment that doesn't have 3 by 3 finger breadth. It's very small. It doesn't have any utility. Not for a wealthy person, not for a poor person. Since there's no utility, it's considered as a muktzah item, and therefore that would be something that you cannot move on Shabbos. Now this is where we start, what we had mentioned in the introduction, a machlekes that's going to take up till the bottom of the amud, basically. Turn about one of the Bryce, the following case, and the Gemara is going to try to attempt to understand what this case is. Shivri Tanu Yasher, the broken pieces of an old oven. What does it mean, an old oven? I mean, it was already heated up once before, so it's earthenware, it's hard, and it's fit to be used as an oven. Harehen Kakola Kalim on the so it's like any vessel which can be moved in the courtyard. An oven in those times, you could have these movable ovens. So it's like a regular vessel that can be moved in the courtyard. That's Divrei Meir. So that's Reb Meir's opinion. Yehuda says, no, Ein Nitalan, they cannot be moved, and the Gemara is going to explain their machlekes shortly and what's the reasoning for that. So we have machlekes here can you move the broken pieces of a vessel or not? So hey, Rabbi Yisrael Shimon ben Yaakov, he testified, Al Shivitan Yashin on the broken pieces of an old oven, Shenitalim b'Shabbos, like Remeir, that it could be moved on Shabbos. That's one halacha. We're going to shortly explain what the machlekes is. And then the Brisa says another case, Val Kisuyev, and regarding the covering of an oven, She'ina Tzarech Beis Yad, that it doesn't need to have a handle, because even without a handle, it would be movable, which is a machlekes in the Mishnah later on. There is an opinion that says it needs to have a handle, and this Tana is saying that it does not have to have a handle. Fine. But now the Gemara says, "B'may kamifli." What is this machlekes that we have over here between Remeir and Yehuda? Again, Remeir says the broken piece of the old oven are like any vessel that can move in the courtyard, and Yehuda says no, it cannot be moved. There's three ways to explain this machlekes. Interpretation number one, Amar Abaye. He says it's Toma ba'osin me'ein malacha, where the broken piece of this oven could still be used for some type of function. For example, you could use it to cover a barrel. But but it doesn't function in its old original status of the vessel, which what's an oven used for? For baking. You can't use it, it's a broken piece. You can't bake anymore inside of it, but you could use it for some other function. That's what kamiflagi, that's what they're disagreeing about. Because of Azr Yehuda l'tamei, Yehuda goes according to his reasoning. Remeir l'tamei, Remeir goes according to his reasoning, which that was the machlekes in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, on the previous stuff, we spoke about shivri kelim, broken piece of a vessel. Remeir says it's me'ein malacha. As long as there's some use, it's considered not muktzah, it's considered muchan, it's considered a vessel. Yehuda says no, it has to be me'ein malachtan. It must resemble the original function. Oh, it doesn't over here because now you have the broken piece of the oven. You can't bake anymore. It's not a good oven. You could use it to cover something else as me'ein malacha, but therefore if you don't, that would be considered as initalan. That's why it would be considered as muktzah. That's interpretation number one for this machlekes. And then Maskevela Rava rejects this, and he says, "Ihachi, wait a second. If that's what they're really disagreeing about, instead of disagreeing regarding broken piece of an oven, why pick an oven? Say in general, any broken piece of any vessel, that is going to be the machlekes if it has a function but not its original function, if that's going to be considered as muktzah or not. Why pick an oven? If you're picking specifics, it sounds like the variable is related to the oven, but it has nothing to do with an oven. It's regarding any kli. So therefore, El Amar Rava gives interpretation number two. He says, B'shivri dahaitana, this is a little bit more complicated, so you have to hold on a little bit tighter over here for this interpretation. We're talking about the broken pieces of the oven that's made in a certain way, which is going to be taught in the Mishnah that says, Rav, I'm about to tell you which Mishnah I'm talking about, where the oven actually was never yet made in a full functioning from its inception, and that oven broke, and that's the machlekes Remeir and Yehuda. What's this case? What type of oven are you telling him about, that kamiflagi that they're disagreeing about, that's the case? So it says Rava like this. He says that not. There's a Mishnah Masechtas Kelim. As Rashi explains, the ovens in their times were made like large pots. They didn't have any bottoms, and you would usually put the oven on the ground, and you would put like cement or lime all around the sides to make it thick so that it retains the heat inside. And that's what's called tefela. Teiflin, they would put like a seal, and it would reach to the bottom, to the ground, and through that, the heat would be retained, because essentially it was really like a cylinder, because it was open on the top too, and it really didn't have a bottom. So, and that was what their ovens were. It's like really movable, but they would put it down on the ground, and you would seal it on the bottom that the heat doesn't escape, and then you would cook things on the top. Now, that says the Mishnah, let's say let's say you didn't put it on the ground. Let's say you put the oven on the opening of a pit, or the opening of a cistern, which that's the same thing as a pit. It's just that a pit is dug in the ground, and a cistern is a structure over ground. But be that as it may, you put the oven on that pit, v'nasan sham even, and then you put a stone between the oven wall and the wall of the pit to like shtup it in, to squeeze it in, that it doesn't fall, because it's really in the ear space of the pit. So you put a rock between the wall of so like it wedges it in, that it should stay over there. So on that we have the following machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda, he says that if the walls above are close to the oven, are close to the walls of the pit, that you really didn't have to put between the walls like a small little thin stone, and you don't really have so much air space recognizable between the walls of the oven and the walls of the pit, that it should hold back the heating up of the oven. Rather, it actually helps the walls of the pit really retain the heat for the oven itself. And additionally, the bottom of the walls of the oven are very close to the bottom of the pit. which, as Rabbi Yehuda explains, that im masig malmata, if you're going to heat up, meaning you're going to make the fire for the oven on the bottom, meaning in the pit itself. The who and the oven is going to be nisik milmala, is going to get heated up on the top in the inside from the fire through the bottom. Or Rashi gives a slightly different interpretation where if the oven is in the airspace of the pit and the heat is going up around the walls of the oven and it's going to get heated up like that, where if let's say it's narrower on the bottom and it's wider on the top, or the pit is wider on the bottom and narrower on the top, so it's going to go around the walls of the oven. Be that as it may, whichever way it is, if you're going to heat up the pit on the bottom, you're going to be able to cook stuff in the oven, even though the fire's in the pit itself. So then tamei. So then it says Rabbi Yehuda, so then the oven's really functioning as a bona fide oven, because you're going to be able to cook stuff inside of it, even if you're heating in the pit. Meaning, the idea is that the oven is considered really as part and parcel of the pit itself. It's heated up in a bona fide way, because even though you're putting the fire in the pit, you see the walls of the pit are going to retain the heat for the oven, so it's going to function in a high functioning way. So therefore, the oven's going to be considered as an oven, and it's going to be as a kli to be mekabel tuma, which only a tanner, the Torah talks about specifically as one of the things that are mekabel tuma. Now, but let's say vimlav. Let's say no. Let's say the only way you could heat up that oven that's on the pit is like other ovens from the inside of the oven. If you would heat up the fire on the bottom of the pit, it wouldn't be, there's too much of a gap between the walls, the insulation is not good. You wouldn't be able to really heat up the oven, which is hanging on the top of the pit, by heating it up in the pit. Then tahar, then actually that type of oven is not going to be as a kli of a tanner to be mekabel tuma. It's going to be tahar, as the Gemara is going to shortly explain the reasoning, because you need to have, to make an oven, hold cup here a second, is that it has to be something that's lacking netitza, lacking being broken. Meaning, the oven has to be something that's really close to being attached. When this thing is not close to the ground, because like we said, even like it's not really attached to the oven, there's such a large, it's not touching the ground. It's also not so close to the pit wall, you need a big rock to really wedge it in over there. So there's no greater need to it being not connected, not being attached, than such a case that we're describing. So you cannot fulfill what the pasuk says, Tana v'kirayim yutats. The Torah tells you, if you have a tamei oven and the oven gets smashed, oh, then it's going to be tar. But that tells me that the only way you could do netitza to be metarid, if it was attached. If it's not attached in the first place, there's no greater breaking than that. So it's never a tanner in the first place to be mekabel tuma, to then be broken, because it was already broken from its inception. We'll explain this shortly in the Gemara. But therefore, it's already broken. So it's not a kli, it's not an oven. And it's not an oven, it's going to be tar. The only way it's an oven, if it's on top of the pit, is if it's really insulated with the pit itself. It's like really contiguous with the oven walls. There's really a very small gap. It's really pretty good insulation. Then it's going to be mekabel tuma. But if not, it's not going to be mekabel tuma. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. And that's going to be important for Rabbi Yehuda, his machlokes is Rabbi Meir. The sages say, no. Since it was heated up, in all situations it's going to be mekabel tuma. Now, says the Gemara, what exactly is the machlekes they're having over here? Says the Gemara, it's in the following pasuk in Vayikra. Pasuk says, "Tam v'kirayim yutats," an oven and a stove. If it's going to be smashed, so tameim heim, tameim they're going to be tamei, but tameim yulachem, and they're going to be tamei for you. Which, as the Gemara explains like this, Yehuda Savi, he holds that mechus and netitza, if it's lacking being smashed, so then tamei, then it's going to be tamei. She'ein mechus and netitza, if it's not lacking being smashed, then tar, then it's going to be tar. Meaning to say that if it's, like we said, if it's attached, then it's tamei. If it's not lacking that, meaning to say it's already smashed now, meaning it's not attached to the ground yet, so then it's going to be tar. It has to have something that you could smash it to undo its tumah. Here, it already, like in the case we described, it already is not. It's already not a kli. And therefore it's not going to be kabel tumah. And therefore, just to explain it, as we're going to explain shortly in a moment, what the case is. Like again, Rav is saying that it's an oven that you put over a hole in the ground. If it's not attached to the ground the first time it's heated, that's the machlekes we have over here between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda regarding these broken pieces of an oven. Rabbi Yehuda holds it's not a kli Why not? Because not makabel tumah, and therefore its broken pieces will certainly not be a kli and will be muktzah, because this thing is not a kli in the first place as it is. Because, like we said, it's not an oven that could be yutatz. It's something that's already yutatz. So therefore, it's not considered the Tana of the Torah that can become tummy. But for Rabban Savi, Rabban held that no, the pasuk says Tmeim yu lachem. It should be tamei for you, which the Torah has already said the word tamei. It's saying it again 2 times. What's it coming to tell you? That even though it really wasn't made in a bona fide way, mikamakim in all situations, it's still going to be makabel tama. It's going to be a kli. Which that's Remeir holds it is a kli, it's makabel tama, and if its broken pieces would also be considered a kli and not be muktzah. That's the primary case that we're interpreting over here. The oven that we're talking about over here is an oven that was heated up for the first time over a pit that really wasn't close to the walls of the pit. The question is, do we consider this as a tanner in the first place or not? Rabbi Yehuda says it's not a tanner because you cannot qualify for tanner b'karayim yutatz. And the Chacham say, no, you could, because the pasuk says the word tameim 2 times. It says tameim hem, tameim yulachem. Why say the word tamei 2 times? To add on another case that you would have thought is not tamei, which is this oven that's not really attached to the pit. It's still going to be considered as a tanner mikabel tama. Now, the Gemara now asks each one, what do they do with the other one's sources? Rabbanan nami haksiv yutatz. It says that it has to be able to be broken. This is already like not attached. It's already broken. Why is it mikabel tama? That says the Gemara hahu. That yutatz, according to the Chacham, is not to teach a leniency the way Rabbi Yehuda had said it, and to say that, oh, if you cannot fulfill netitza, like this case, which is not really built and attached in the first place, so it's already by default not to it, that it should be tar. No. According to the Chachamim, the reason why the pasuk is telling you v'tameim yulachem as a riboy is actually coming to tell you li'idach gisa. It's coming to tell you the other way around, that as a stringency. Don't say that every oven that's made in its normal way, which is attached to the ground, so it's like a house, which is like attached to the ground, which is like karka, because it's attached to the ground. We say generally it's not makabel tomo. So you would have you would have thought to say kivin the chibri ba'ari, since you attached the oven to the ground. Kagufa the ardam, it would be like a piece of earth. Anytime we say what's mochabel karka is karka dami, and we know earth is not makabel tomo, so you would have thought a regular oven actually would not be makabel tomo. Kamash Malam, that's what Yutatz is coming to tell you, that no, even so, it does apply to Natitza. In other words, it's coming to tell you that even though it's something that could be Nitatz, means to say it is attached to the ground, even so we're saying that it's going to be Makabel Tumah, and for sure when it's lacking Natitza, like when it is a vessel, that like for sure it's going to be Makabel Tumah, but it's actually coming to tell us as a stringency, not as a leniency. Which, according to Rabbi Yehuda, was teaching us a leniency that, oh, okay, it's only something that could be broken. If it can't be, then it's not going to be kabel tumah. No, they're saying that it's coming to tell you a stringency. That the pasuk is saying, Tana b'karayim yutatz. Even though this is something that could be broken, means it because it's attached to the ground, still tameim and tameim yulachem, it's going to be tamei, even though it's mechubel lekarka. Okay, that explains what the Chacham do with Rabbi Yehuda's source. But then says the Gemara, B'idach nam Rabbi Yehuda, what does he do with the Chacham's source? Haksiv, the pasuk says tameim yulachem. It says first tameim him, and then it says tameim yulachem. What's the kefelas? What's the redundancy? What's the ribu coming to teach us? It's not teaching us like the Chacham say according to Yehuda. So it says the Gemara, that is Kid Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol. That's coming to teach us like Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol. Now Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol, he says, Machlekes, this whole Machlekes you read then the Chachamim was only behesik rishon. The first time he heated up the oven, meaning to say, this case that we're describing over here, it was never heated up ever yet beforehand. The first time it was ever heated up is the case that they're disagreeing about, which that's the machlekes regarding, is it going to make it into a kli or not? Because the first time you heat up an oven is what makes it a kli, as the Mishnah teaches Masechtas Kelim. What's considered a gemar malacha, what finishes off a vessel to make it into a kli, is when you heat it up, the amount that you could bake donuts inside of it. That's the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda, and he says that no, the first time you heat it up, it's on top of a pit like this. It's not fit to make it into a vessel because it's not really attached to the ground. Well, the hesek sheni. But if it's the second time you're heating up the oven, meaning let's say initially you had this oven on the ground like every regular oven, attached to the ground, or you had a thick stone and it was heated up over there, so it became a kli. Then at the end, after you once heated up in the normal way, then you took it from there, you put it on top of the pit, and here on top of the pit, it's becoming tameh. That Rabbi Yehuda agrees that yes, from the ribuya from v'tameim yulachem, that it's going to be makabel tumah, even though now it's not, it's mechusar and the titza, doesn't make a difference. It already became an oven the first time when it was on the ground, so it became a kli. Now when you can remove it and put it on top of something that really, it's not really attached, it would be still remaining with the status of a kli. And I feel it totally b'tzav gamal. Even if it's on the, hanging from the neck of a camel, meaning it's like really not attached to anything, doesn't make a difference. It's not going to lose the status of a vessel unless if, let's say, you cut up the oven the way we know the laws of purifying an oven, which you have to break the earthenware parts of it, the covering, only then is it going to be not a kli anymore. But it's not going to be purified from taking it intact from its original place in the ground and putting it over the pit. It's still going to retain. That we know from the Riboy, from V'tamei, Yilachem, that Rabbi Yehuda would agree over there that it would be Mekabel Tumah. Because again, their Omach Lekis is if it's not attached to the ground the first time that it's heated. Now, Ama'ula, he just points out a Chiddush also the other way around. He says, V'hesek Rishon l'Rabbanan. And the first time heating it according to the Rabbanan, that we said that they learned out from the Riboy of the Pasuk, that even though the heat's really not retained, insulated so well on top of this pit, it's still going to be Mekabel Tumah. So that says Ula. Don't say that when you put on the pit specifically, that's where we're saying, okay, it's not really, it's a huge gap in the insulation, but still it's on top of the pit. No, even according to Rabbanah that they say the first time you're heating it up, even though it's not attached to the ground, it is going to be Mekabel Tumah. That's also a filatol b'tzav gamal. That's even if it's hanging from the neck of a camel and it's heated up the first time over there, that it is going to be Mekabel Tumah because they don't interpret yutats the way Yehuda holds. It doesn't have to be something that could be broken. No, even if it's not attached to the ground. To the contrary, it's a chiddush that even if it is attached to the ground, that it's not going to be considered as mechubla karka and bitar, that it could be Mekabel Tumah. But one thing is, this is really where we end the interpretation of Rava, which he explains the machlekes specifically in an oven. The first interpretation, we had a question, says, according to Abai's interpretation, he says, well, why specifically an oven? It's regarding me'ein malach or me'ein malachta. No, so Rava gave interpretation, specifically an oven, the first time it's heated up, in such a type of a oven, where it wasn't attached to the ground the first time it's heated, and you have an oven put over a hole, that's Machlekes Shemain Yehuda. Are we going to consider such a thing as an oven or not? To Mekabel Tumah. And therefore that's what is related to Shabbos. Is it a Kli, that it's not Muktzah, or is it not a Kli, and therefore it's going to be Muktzah? However, the Gemara rejects this interpretation too. Maskela Ravashi. Ravashi asks, and he says, on Rava, that he explains the Machlekes regarding moving the pieces of a broken old oven, like we explained just before, that the broken pieces of such an oven, which were never attached to the ground the first time it was heated up, he's bothered. He says, what do you mean? The oven itself, according to Yehuda, is not a vessel, not just the broken pieces. So it says Ravashi, if that's the interpretation of this machlekes, instead of arguing regarding the broken piece of an oven, disagree regarding the oven itself, as the Gemara explains. If the Rebbe Yehuda holds the oven itself is not considered a vessel because it's lacking yutats, it's never attached to the ground, and if it's not a kli of an oven, so shvar mebayda, I have to tell you regarding the broken pieces. Why would you say regarding a broken pieces the same applies to the oven while intact? Therefore, he rejects that interpretation too, and he brings the third interpretation of this machlekes. Elam Ravashi says lo'im kedamar mikar. Truth is, like we said, the way Abaye wanted to say in the original interpretation. They were talking about that these broken pieces of the old oven, that they could still form a function, but not its original function. So it does make what's called me'in malacha, but not me'in malachtan. And we're talking about a regular, full functioning oven that was heated up the regular way, attached to the ground, and so on and so forth. But then the question we had asked Abaye was, wait a second, according to Abaye, why are you picking specifically an oven? You should be disagreeing regarding any vessel that broke. That's the machlekes we have in the Mishnah between Rabbi and Yehuda, if it requires mei malachtan or it's enough mei malacha. Oh, and that's where Rashi comes to answer. He says, no, we needed to say specifically regarding an oven because it's interesting over here. The oven does a little bit me'ein malachtan. You could still bake in it. So therefore, that's where we would have thought to say that they wouldn't disagree. And then we have to tell you that no, the machlekes is even in such a case. Why? What's the case? Uba'isa ma'isa tafka. The broken pieces could still function as a tafka. What's a tafka? What they used to do is they would take tiles and they would heat it up and bake on top of the tile. So too these broken pieces are still wide pieces. Now the thing is, but there's no receptacle. So you can't heat up the tile from the inside. Rather you have to heat up the tile on the outside. These broken pieces, like they would do for these tiles, that they would heat up a tile on the outside and then you would put food like an egg on the top and cook it like that. So it's not because your mayor requires me'ein malachtan. is just because it's for Rabbi Yehuda that we said this, as the Gemara explains. Remeir l'dvar Rabbi Yehuda kamer. Remeir was saying, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's why he picked the case of the oven to disagree with him. And he was telling Rabbi Yehuda like this. He says, Lidadi, according to me, says Remeir, even if it just functions in any type of activity, as we taught us in the Mishnah, it would be considered clear and there wouldn't be muktzah. So we don't have to talk about an oven. You're right. We can talk about any broken vessel. But according to you, at least agree to me, the kahai gavna in such a case by the broken piece of an old oven, where malachtahu, it's still considered its original function because you could bake in it with tafka. The oven can't be used as a regular oven, but it can still be used for baking things, for cooking things. So it should still be me'ei malachtan. And that's Rabbi Yehuda. He says no, loydam, it's not comparable. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's going to be muktzah. It's not going to be considered me'ei malachtan. Why? What do you mean? You can still use it for baking. Because Hasam over there by an intact oven has sekum mibifnim. The way Talmudic ovens were, you would put the fire on the bottom of the oven, and then you would put the slabs of dough on the walls, and that's how you would heat up the oven. Hach over here, once you have these broken pieces of the oven, has sekum mibachutz. You can only heat up on the outside, not on the inside. It's not me'in malachtan. And so too, another difference, he says, Hasam over there, when it's intact, mu'umad. By an oven, like we just said, they would bake with standing up, meaning they would take the dough, they would attach it, they would throw the slabs of the dough on the walls of the oven, and it would stand like that. They wouldn't put it laying down on the bottom, like by these tiles, which they're laying down on the tiles. So it's different because there it's standing up. Over here, the dough would be lav mu'min, not standing, and therefore it's not qualified as me'ein malachtan. That's why we specifically said the case of an oven. You're right, it is the al-gemena. It is the machlekes we had in the Mishnah. So it's similar to Abaya, but Rav Ashi is explaining that it makes sense. It's specifically an oven that you would have thought here they would not disagree. That's what come to say that no, even over here, that they would still disagree. Now, we just finished off the brisa that said, hey, Rabbi Yisrael Mishum Elazar ben Yaakov, we quoted the brisa that says that he testified, first of all, Ashiri Tana Yashin, regarding the broken piece of an oven, Shenetalim b'Shabbos, that they could be moved on Shabbos. So again, that's just that he was saying like the opinion of Reb Meir. And then a second thing he testified was Val Kisuyeh, regarding the covering of an oven, She'enu Tzarech Beis Yad, that it doesn't need to have a handle to move it. Meaning, even without a handle, it's considered useful. So, which the Gemara says, Amar Ravina says, Kamamet al Talinon Heidna, according to whom do we move today, in these days, Kisui de Tanuri, the covers of an oven, as Rashi explains, their ovens, because the opening was on the top, so there was a covering so that the heat doesn't go out. And after they would attach the bread, they would cover it. So this that those coverings in the ovens, the Masa Machasir, from this place Masa Machasir, the Ein Lahem Beis Achiza, that it doesn't have a handle and still they move it, according to whom is that like? So the Gemara, come on, who's that like? It's Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, who he testified that the covers don't need to have a handle to make it a muchan, to make it not muktzah, and that's why they move it. Now continuing the halacha, the next Mishnah, continuing on these halachas of muktzah. Says the Mishnah, an interesting case. However, if there's a stone, should be kiruya, that's on a dried gourd. A gourd is like a pumpkin, it's from that family of these hard types of vegetables. That's hollowed out, and they would draw water with it, almost like a bucket, because you have imagine a pumpkin, and you hollow out the pumpkin. It's a great bucket. Now the problem is, since the gourd is very light, you can't really draw water with it because it's just going to float on the top. So what they would do is they would put a rock inside of it to weigh it down. So it says the Mishnah as follows: if you're going to fill up water with that pumpkin, that gourd, ve'ein in the felas, and the stone's not going to fall off because it's tied on very well to the opening of the pumpkin. So therefore, you made the stone as part of the kli, as part of the vessel. So memalba, so you could fill up with such a bucket on Shabbos. The stone is not muktzah; it's actually part of the kli. But vimlav, but if not, then it's like a regular stone. Then ein memalba, and then you cannot fill up with that bucket, with that pumpkin on Shabbos. You cannot move even the pumpkin, because the pumpkin became a basis, is a base for the stone that's carrying it. Because it was put intentionally, the stone on top of the bucket, so the stone is not part of the vessel because it's going to float all around, so it's going to fall out. And now you actually made the muktzah, now you even made the pumpkin itself muktzah, because it's a base for a davar asik. We continue on the base where the Mishnah continues with a similar type of a case regarding zmayra, regarding a vine, a branch of a grapevine, shikshur b'tafiach, which is attached to a jug, which also they would draw water from the pit or from a spring. So here, Mamalam B'Shabbos, Here, it's obviously attached, so it's not going to fall away. So you can fill up with that bucket on Shabbos because you made the branch also into a kli. You attached it to the vessel, it became like the handle of the kli. Now, another case, which we'll explain in the Gemara a little bit more, is pekakach aloin, regarding the closer of a window, like some type of a shutter of a window. So Rebbe Machlek is exactly what does it have to be like to be able to close that on Shabbos. He says, Bizman Shehu, when the shutter is kosher b'toli, when it's tied and it's hanging. What does it mean it's hanging? I mean it's not dragging on the ground, which is the rope that it's tied with doesn't reach to the ground. Then then you could use that board to shutter the window. But if not, let's say it's not attached, or let's say it's hanging on the ground, then then you're not allowed to shutter the window with that. And the reason for that is because it looks like you're adding onto a structure. It looks like you're taking something from the ground and just putting it onto a structure. You're not allowed to do that. That's adding onto a building, and therefore that would be forbidden. But again, it looks like it is really attached, but it looks like that would be forbidden. But for Chachamim, the sages disagree. They say no, beinkach or beinkach. The Gemara can explain exactly what does this mean, beinkach or beinkach. But it says either way, you could shutter the window with that shutter. Now the Gemara brings Tanan Hasan. The Gemara brings a Mishnah later on the Masechta of Kavman Beis Mabeis that's going to relate back to the halacha of our Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches as follows: Evan shal pi achabes. If you have a stone on top of a barrel, which you need to take wine from inside that barrel. So what do? So mata, you could tilt the barrel, altzida on its side, v'hinei fellas, and then the stone's going to fall off. Now, however, Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbami, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, he says, Loi shanu, we didn't learn, which actually Rashi adds on to the case over here. There's one more added part to this case. The halacha is, you're allowed to even move the barrel with the stone on top of it, as the Mishnah there actually adds on, says, let's say that barrel was it was in your wine cellar, in a lot of different barrels. Now you're free to tilt the barrel with the rock on top of it, because it's going to fall on top of another barrel on the side. It's going to break that whole barrel, and you'll have a loss of that whole barrel. So halacha is you're allowed to actually lift up the barrel with the rock on top of it, take it all the way to the far end where there's no barrels around it, then tilt it, and then the rock falls down. So that Rabbi Yechanan, according to Rabbah, there's going to be actually two versions. There's Rabbah Amar Bami named Rabbi Yechanan, and there's going to be a very different version of Rabbi Asi named Rabbi Yechanan. This first version says in the Rabbi Yechanan that we didn't learn this halacha ela b'sheichach, only if you forgot the stone on top of the barrel, but it was unintentional. So it never became a busses, it was never really part of the barrel, just some guy left a rock on top of here. So it didn't become, so what do you do on Shabbos? Okay, you just tilt the barrel and you'll knock off. So Evan agrees to this part of Rabbi Yechanan's statement, that when it's b'sheichach, when you forgot the stone in the barrel, then you're allowed to tilt it and have the rock come off. Now, we're going to have two different interpretations in the second half of this Rabbi Yechanan statement. But if, let's say, the rock was placed deliberately on top of the barrel before Shabbos, so then the barrel becomes a base for the rock, which is l'davar aser, for something that's forbidden, and then you can't even move the barrel. The barrel itself is mukta now because it became a base, like the leichter, like the tray. The tray itself is mukta. It was deliberately placed, so it became a buses.
Why isn't it a buses for the beer that's inside?
What?
Why isn't it a buses for the beer that's inside?
For the beverage, for the wine that's inside of it? Well, this is on top of the barrel. That's on top of it.
It's a separate part of the...
Yes, the barrel itself is the entity. On top of that, so the whole barrel is a permitted thing. On top of the barrel is this forbidden thing.
Only the cover is muktzah.
No, but not the cover.
The cover really is part of the barrel. If it was separate, maybe you would have a discussion regarding...
The barrel is the wine.
Yeah, but this is on top of the barrel. It's the barrel. The barrel itself, inside the barrel is the wine. The barrel itself is a kli. On top of that barrel is a muktzah item. So it's becoming a basis for something that's forbidden. So therefore, actually, then you're not going to be able to even tilt the barrel. Now that's interpretation number one. So this again, it's the same Rabbi Yechanan, but it's Rabbi Yisrael, the name of Rabasi. He actually says the same wording as a leniency. Loishanu, we didn't learn that actually you have to tilt the barrel and you can't take the rock by your own hands and take it off. That's ela b'sheichach. It's only where you forgot the rock and you didn't intend to make it as part of the vessel. But if you deliberately left it over there, then actually nasa, then the rock actually becomes a kisul achaves. It becomes a cover for the barrel, and you actually can take off the rock with your hands in the regular way. Because you made it as a cover for the barrel. So we have a machlekes over here. regarding if you left the rock on top, does it actually make it so problematic that you can't remove the barrel to tilt it? Or actually makes it so much better that you actually could just pick up the rock itself? It's a cover for the barrel. Now, on that, the Gemara actually brings an Amar Rabbah. Rabbah, who is the first interpretation, says, Meisviden Ashmaiten. He says, we had asked on our teaching, which was on my own version, he says that I said that when it's placed, then the stone does not become a kli. To the contrary, it actually makes the barrel more muktzah. From our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, oh, Eben should be kiruya if you have a stone in the gourd, in the pumpkin. We said, if you're going to draw the water and the rock's not going to fall, you could pick up, you could lift it up with that rock inside of it. So obviously the stone is becoming a kli by putting it into the pumpkin. So you see that putting something on top of a barrel, it becomes as part of the kli. So why am I saying that it's going to be muktzah and it's actually going to make the barrel into buses? And that says, Rabbah says, no, Velohi, it's not difficult. Hasam over there in the Mishnah, even the hodka, since it's wedged in, it's attached very well. Shavi Davi, you're making it as like the wall of the barrel of the pumpkin. Here, just putting on top of the barrel, it's not making part of the kli, and therefore it's going to be considered as a muktzah item. That's Rabbah's version. Now, Rabbi Yosef, who he was the second interpretation, he says, he says, we also asked on our own teaching, but from the Sefer of the Mishnah. Because the Mishnah then said in the second half of that statement, it says, and im lav, and if let's say you don't attach it well to the pumpkin, you cannot lift up the water with it. And that is, we don't say that just by putting the rock inside the pumpkin, it becomes part of the kli. Wait a second, says Rabbi Yosef, that's difficult on me. I said when you just put the rock on top of the barrel, it becomes a cover for the barrel, just putting it on top. So why didn't you say the same thing about the pumpkin too? Why not just putting the rock on top of the pumpkin? It's just going to make it as part of the pumpkin, as part of the kli. So why over there would it be considered as muktzah? And that says Rabbi Yosef Elohi. No, it's not difficult to me. Because Hassam over there, since you didn't tie it onto the pumpkin, so you can't use it to fill it up from the pit. Because it's going to fall away, and then the pumpkin's just going to float on the top. So there, keeping the loyhadka, since you didn't wedge it in well, so to the contrary, betuli butla, you nullified it from having the status of a vessel, because you revealed your intention that you're obviously not considering it as significant to be able to utilize it as part of the pail. But the covering for a barrel, putting it on top is enough, is already used as a function of a cover. And therefore, just placing it would make it into a vessel, and therefore, it's not difficult on neither Rabbah or Rabbi Yosef from the halacha of our Mishnah, whether the ratio or the sefer, from the halacha with the rock in the pumpkin to use it as a pail. Now, says Gemara, what is the basis of their machlekes? Why do they say what they do say? Says Gemara like this: Marsa Rabbah held be'inon maisa. You need to have a significant act. Just putting a rock on top of a barrel is not a significant act to say, oh, this is part of the vessel. And therefore, he says if you put on to the contrary, it's a muktzah rock, and this becomes the base for the muktzah, and if it's going to be muktzah. But in Marsa he said, no, let me in mice. You don't need to have such a full-fledged action. Just putting it on top is already enough of a minimal action to make it as a cover for the barrel, and therefore it's not going to be muktzah, and actually it's going to be permitted itself as a cover for the barrel. And says the Gemara Azl Tamayu, Reb Ami and Rabasi, which is Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef, which are these two different interpretations of the name of Rabbi Yechanan, they go according to the reasoning mentioned elsewhere. What is this? Because Dichi Asr Rav Dima Amr Chanina, Vamilan, some say it was when Amr Zera Chanina, he says, Pamachas Halach Rebbe L'Makom Echad. One time Rebbe went to a certain place on Erev Shabbos, U'motza Nadvich Shalavan, and he found a row of stones, which there were a bunch of stones around over there, but they were set aside for structure, for construction, so they were muktzah stones. So he said to his students, go out and think and calculate regarding these stones, so we should be able to sit on them tomorrow. Rebbe didn't require them to do any action, just think about it. That machshav itself, thinking, oh, we want to use this as shears tomorrow when we're having the shear, is enough to make it not muktzah anymore. Now, but Rabbi Yechanan, he actually disagrees. He says, no, Hitzrichen Rebbe Lamaisa, Rebbe did require them to do an action, some type of a action to those stones to make them non-muktzah. Now, the thing is, but my amlu, there's a machlekes, as we said, according to Rabbi Yechanan, that required an action. What did Rebbe tell them? What type of an action was requiring of them to not make it muktzah anymore? So here we have the machlekes, Rabami and Rabasi, which is the same machlekes in the previous Gemara's discussion. Rabami, he says, Rebbe said to his students, go out and make them boards, meaning organize them in the way of like benches, so that we won't have to go ahead and go through the effort tomorrow. Now, why? Because you cannot prepare it to make it not muktzah, to make it as a kli, with just a minimal action. You have to go ahead and actually organize them and put them in like the form of benches. Now, that's Rabbi Ami according to his reasoning, that he said before that a stone cannot become a kli by just placing it. That's the same as Rabbah. Rabbah says by just placing the rock on top of a barrel doesn't make it as part of a kli. A ma'aseh ba'alma, a small insignificant act, is not going to make it as a kli. So only if you arrange the seating, just let's say wiping it would be not significant, because he holds be'inan ma'aseh. You need an action. Whereas Rabbi Amalu, he said no. What Rebbe said to them was tu v'shavshim Amalu. He just said go and wipe them down from the mud so that you should be clean to sit on. Tomorrow we'll organize them and make them into boards. So you see that according to Rebbe Asi, it's enough to just do a very small insignificant act that will make it quote unquote into a kli. That's exactly what the machlekes was in our previous Gemara's discussion. The same idea, where Rabbah said, the interpretation holds that you need an action, you have to have it attached. Whereas Rabbi Yosef said that no, you don't need a ma'aseh. All it is enough to go ahead and just put on top. That's the same thing that machlekes is here in the same story with Rebbe, that if he says it's enough just to wipe it down, that's because a minor act would be significant enough to make it into a vessel, that you like a bench that you could sit on Shabbos. And Rabasi says no, that you need to have an actual ma'aseh and to arrange the seating. That's lishitasam that we find in the same machlekes. Now Itmar, it was taught that it was just regarding the story itself. Rabbi Yisrael Shalom, he says at Savar, there was actually a pile shal kairis of beams, and it wasn't stones. That's what it was. It was new beams that they had them laid up over there for construction, that they shouldn't get bent. That's what was there in that story, and that's what Rebbe says, either to wipe them down or to make them into like rows that we could sit on it tomorrow. Rabbi Yisrael Shalom, he says no, actually gishay shal safina. It was this long piece of wood that the sailors use in the front of the boat, that they have the stick sticking into the water to know if they're still in deep or into shallow waters, to know if the boat could go over there. That's what it was. It was a pile of those. The Gemara explains. Mandam Geshayis, according to the one that says that it was this the pole that's used to measure the depth of the water. Well, Kashkin Svar, for sure that if it was just a pile of beams, for sure it would, what Rebbe had asked them to do would make it na-muktzah. But Mandam Svar, according to the one that says that it's actually a stack of beams, of a Geshayis, but actually regarding the case of the poles to measure the depth of the water, actually kapitala. No, a person is very particular about them, that they don't bend, and you designate a place, and you're actively setting it aside as muktzah. Even according to Reb Shimon, it would be forbidden to be moved, because here it's muktzah machna chassan kis. It's a very valuable thing, and even Reb Shimon would agree, and there actually would not be sufficient with just a small minor act, and therefore that, according to that version, they don't disagree with it, and everyone would agree that it would be forbidden unless you do a significant act to make it prepared for Shabbos, because that's considered what's called muktzah machnas chassan kis. Now, we said in the Mishnah, regarding the second case, Zmarushi Kashur, if you have a grapevine, a branch that's attached to a jug, so v'chulu, etc., which we said that, you could go ahead and fill up that water with that pail on Shabbos, where even though a branch is certainly something that's muktzah, but it's not muktzah anymore because it's attached to the thing. It's like the handle of the vessel. But the Gemara makes the following dik and asks as a question. So it sounds like shurin only if this branch is attached to the jug. But like shura, let's say it's not attached. As Rashi explains, what do you mean not attached? How would it be part of the jug? Let's say you bent the end of the branch like a fork, where now you could hang the jug from it and draw with it, and you had in mind that you want to use it as a handle, but it wasn't tied onto it. It's just like you bent the end of it, and now it's like a hook. Sounds like that loy. Then that wouldn't be allowed to go ahead and use that on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, let's say this would not be like Reb Shimon Gamliel. The Tanya learned the Brayso, charoya shel dekel. Charoyas are the hard branches of a palm tree. Shegargun la'etzim, where when the person chopped them off the tree, his intention was to use it as firewood for fuel. But then he changed his mind. He wants to use it as to use it as benches, good hard branches. He wants to use it as a bench. So says the Tana Kama, so tzarich liksha. So that means to say before Shabbos you have to do a real bona fide act. You have to tie them together. If you tie the bundle of the branches together and make it in the form of a bench, then you could use it. If not, it's going to be muktzah. Shimon Gamliel he says, no, ain't tzarich likshur, you don't have to tie it. So wait a second. Shimon Gamliel says that if you want to take a muktzah item, which are these branches, which we generally use for fuel, but for Shabbos you want to use it as a bench. He says, you don't have to tie it. It's okay. Just thinking about it, it's going to be enough. That sounds not like our Mishnah. Because if you don't have to tie something, then why do you have to tie the vine onto the pitcher? Just make it as a hook. Because you don't have to do even the action. It's just to put them together. You don't have to tie them together. So why do you have to tie on the branch onto the jug? So Rav Sheshes said, no, you could even say that halacha of our Mishnah is like Shimon Gamliel. Because why do you have to tie it on? Because what are we talking about? We're talking about mechuberes be'aviha. We're saying where it's attached to its father, means to say the branch of the vine is still attached to the grapevine. It's still attached to the ground. Yeah, so if you don't tie it on, just making a hook is not going to be significant enough to undo it from its muktzah status as something that's attached to the ground. If you want to make it that it's not muktzah anymore, that's really part of the jug, you would have to tie it onto the jug. Because it's attached to the ground, it requires a greater level of taking it away from its muktzah status. But the Gemara says, if it's attached to the ground, you're using something that's attached to the ground. And even if you knotted it and you tied it on from before Shabbos, it should be forbidden to be used because it's attached to the ground. We know things that are growing from the ground are muktzah. Says the Gemara, no, lamata megimel. We're talking about where this branch is within 3 tvachim from the ground, which, as Rashi explains, let's say it's drawing from a stream which is not so deep. Now, you're actually allowed to use a tree that's lower than 3 tvachim from the ground, as the Gemara says in the last parak in Eruvin of Tzadik Tesem Beis, where if the roots were higher than 3 tvachim, then you can't sit on it. But if it's lower, you actually could. So, yeah, it's attached to the ground. It's not a problem about using something attached to the ground because it's lower than 3 tvachim from the ground. And yes, since it's attached to the ground, we don't see it as a handle unless you actually tie it on, even according to Shimon Gamliel. A second interpretation of Hashem, it says, no, full-time betlusha. You could even say it's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, and it's not even attached to the ground, it's even detached from the ground. So if it's attached, why do you have to tie it on? It's Gezer Shema Yikta. Here, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would agree you have to tie it on because we're concerned that you might come to cut it. Meaning, if you don't tie it on from before Shabbos, maybe tomorrow you're going to see that this branch is very long. So you're going to come to cut it because a vine from a grapevine is very soft. It's very easy to break. So if you're going to break it to make it the right size, that you could use it as a good size to draw the water, you're going to be making it into a kli then, and you can be chayiv for makam patish. But that concern that you might come to break it, that's why we make you tie it on. So like you already made it into the vessel, you're not going to be breaking it anymore. It's not tied on. You might say, okay, let me bend it this way and bend it that way. You might come to break it and make it into a kli. In contrast, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's own case regarding the bench, regarding the hard branches of the palm tree that you want to sit on it, there's no such a concern because it's very hard. So you're not going to come to break it. So yeah, just thinking about it is enough, and then you don't have to tie it. And therefore, we're able to say that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel could even be like the Tana Mishnah that requires you tying it on, and not just enough to making it and thinking about it from before Shabbos. The last case that we spoke about in the Mishnah was Pekakach Aloin V'chulu. Regarding the window shutters, we had a Machlekes Reb Eliezer and the Chacham regarding what is the status of that window shutter, where according to the Chachamim, according to Reb Eliezer, he says, look, if it's tied on and it's hanging, then you could use to close the window. But if it's not tied on, or even if it's tied on but it's hanging on the ground, you cannot use that to close the window shutters. Chacham said no, benkach, which we're going to explain on the next stop, their opinion. It sounds like in all cases, they're not concerned, you're allowed to use it to close the window. Now that the Gemara makes a qualification in this machlekes. Amar Rabba Babachon Amar B'Yechon. It says, everybody agrees, she'ein oisin oil arai. You're not allowed to initially make even a temporary structure. Let's say, as Rashi describes, let's say you have 4 walls or 4 poles. You're not allowed to spread out a mat, a cover, a curtain on top of those 4 poles to make a shade of oil to save from the sun, b'tchila b'yamtiv, initially yamtiv. So even though it's totally temporary, you just have these walls, or you have this, let's say a porch, and you want to just take like a curtain, it's such a hot day, someone takes a towel and covers it over to cover, you're not allowed to do that b'tchila b'yamtiv initially on yamtiv. Then it's tzarich b'Shabbos, you have to say you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. Now, it's actually machlekes Rashi in places over here. Rashi says it's specifically a roof. The walls are not an oil, and you're actually allowed to spread out curtains for protection, to be discreet on Yom Tov, which Rabbeinu Tam says, well, actually you could have a problem with oil even on the walls if it's helping for some type of heter. But Rashi's bothered. He says if I hold it, it's not a problem about walls, so then why are you allowed to make the shutters for the windows in the Mishnah, which is also walls, says no, because that's a permanent structure. So that looks like you're adding on to a building. But Rashi says there, for impermanent structure, you're allowed to put up walls on Shabbos, but we're talking about a roof. Even a temporary oil, you're not allowed to make on Yom Tov B'Shur on Shabbos. The whole machlekes they had was regarding adding on. So for example, let's say you had a mat that was rolled up. This is actually the classic halacha we'll discuss regarding, like you have on the schach for the shlach, or you have the porch, or you have the child's carriage. But you have something that's a roof, but it's rolled up. Now there's still some space, and tomorrow you're going to roll it out. So that's similar to the shutter, where you're really just adding on. You already have the structure. It's adding on to the structure. That's the machlekes. Shabbat Eliezer, he says, you can't even add on Yom Tov. You don't say on Shabbos. The sages say, which the halacha follows like that, you could add on, you don't have to say on Yom Tov. So like, that's where the classic halacha is, like when you have the porches with as long as there's something there that's covering a little bit, you're allowed to roll out the rest. You're allowed to be moisef on oil arai on Yom Tov, on Shabbos, and for sure on Yom Tov. That's the machlekes regarding could you add on. That's the case of the shutter where you're really just adding on temporarily. That was their machlekes regarding can you do that. But you're right, to make a even an impermanent structure initially on Shabbos Yom Tov, that would be forbidden. Some of this we spoke about today's daf was regarding the kremius, these small little strips of a mat. You're allowed to move it on Shabbos because the mat itself, what's it usable for? Is to cover things. The strips are also usable to cover, and therefore it's not going to be muktzah on Shabbos. Whereas, let's say the leftovers of the praise miyos, which are these, like a talis, a worn-out talis, a small swath of that garment, that you're not allowed to move because, as it was explained, it doesn't even have 3x3 finger breadth, so it's not useful for not a niyam, not a shim, and therefore it's going to be considered as muktzah. We spoke about the broken pieces of an old oven. Now, this was a machlekes between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Reb Meir says yes, like old vessels, and that it's going to be mutter to move, and Rabbi Yehuda says no, it cannot be moved. So what is this machlekes of the broken piece of the old oven? So we had a three-way machlekes regarding how to interpret the case. Interpretation number one was saying like, yeah, it's the same machlekes in our Mishnah. If it's talking about that, okay, the broken piece of the oven, it could still be used in some function. Let's say it could cover a barrel, but it doesn't function in its old function. You can't use it as an oven anymore. So that's the machlekes as we have in the Mishnah. Is that enough to make it as a kli or not? Then the Gemara says no, but then why disagree regarding the oven? Just disagree regarding any kli then. Why pick specifically an oven? It's the machlekes in any kli. So the Gemara gives a second interpretation. It says we're talking about an oven that was heated up in an oven, but again, not on the bottom, in a pit. It was not attached to the ground, which therefore was not really made in its normal functioning from the beginning, and then it broke. That's the machlekes. Is it going to have the tumah of quote unquote an oven? Is that an oven? So it's a kli, so it's not muktzah, or is it not an oven? What's the machlekes? Machlekes was in the pasuk of Yutatz. If Yudah says, if it's not lacking the titza, meaning you cannot do Yutatz to it, so then it's tar, because it's not an oven, quote unquote. So it's not an oven, so then it's muktzah, because it's not a kli. Now the Chacham, they actually interpret that pasuk as a stringency. They actually say that no, it's coming to tell you that even though it is attached to the ground, still it's mekabel tumah. That we don't say anything that's mechubel karkas kekarkadam, and generally something that's attached to the ground is not mekabel tumah. So it's a chiddush the other way around. Now the Chacham, what was their source? They said because it says two times in the pasuk tameim, which is a ribui, to include even the case of when it's not attached to the ground, even the first time you're heating it up, that it's going to be mekabel tumah. Whereas according to Yehuda, he actually says no, the word tameim is including only when you heat up the second time on top of that pit. The first time has to be on the ground for it to be a kli to mekabel tumah. So that was the second interpretation for what was this case of disagreeing regarding the shivri Tana Yashin. What's the Tana Yashin that we're talking about? We said this oven that was heated up the first time on a pit that really wasn't so close to the walls of the pit, and then the question is that considered Tana or not, to be considered kli or not to mekabel tumah, which is also regarding Shabbos. But then the Gemara says, wait a second. Then why are you disagreeing regarding the broken pieces? Disagree regarding the oven itself. Nothing to do with the broken pieces. Is this an oven or not? Therefore, you could disagree not with the broken pieces. So the third interpretation, Rav Ashi says, you're right. Really, it's like we said in the first interpretation, like the way Abaye says, that it's me'in malacha, but not me'in malachta. And so why pick specifically an oven to say it could be any kli? To tell you a chiddush, that Rabbi Yehuda is going to still consider it as muktzah, even though it still does a little bit of a functioning of afiyah, but it's different. You can still do tafka, it can still be baked on it, but it's different. Therefore, he does not consider it malachtan. Why? Because by a regular oven, when it's intact, so then you heat up from inside the oven. Here, you have to heat up on the outside of those tiles. So therefore, it's different. So to a regular oven, the bread is being baked when it's standing on the walls. Here, it's not standing. Here, it's laying down on the tiles. Therefore, it's not. So it's lav me'ein malachtan, and that's the chiddush of specifically why we disagree in this case, because it is the same machlekes. But we had to tell you that even over here, Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold that it's not me'ein malachtan, even though you really could still bake. That's the chiddush in this case of the oven. Then went to the next Mishnah regarding the stone in the gourd and the pumpkin. So we said if it doesn't fall, so then you could fill up with it. If it does, then you cannot. We had a similar case regarding a branch of a palm tree that's tied onto the jug that you could fill up with it because it's part of the jug. Then we spoke about the window shutter. We had a machlekes. Rebbe Eliezer says it's only if it's tied and hanging, then you could close it. The Chacham say no, in all situations you could go ahead and close the window with that shutter. Now, the Gemara brought a Mishnah from later on in this Masechta regarding a stone on a barrel. We said, okay, you could move the barrel, and even you could tilt the stone off it. So we had two different versions of Rabbi Yechanan. What does it mean? Lo shanu ela shecheach. That everyone agrees to. We only learned that when it's forgotten, the first version says, but if you placed it on it, it actually becomes a basis, and actually you cannot move even the barrel itself because it's the base for the muktzah stone. The second version was actually saying as a leniency. No, we didn't say that you have to tilt the barrel to get the stone off only when you forget it. But if you placed it, it actually becomes a cover for the barrel, and then you're actually allowed to move the stone as like a regular kli and take it off. Now, each one asked from the same case of our Mishnah. The first version asked from the Reish of our Mishnah, of the first part of that statement. The second version asked from the second part. Rabbah, who said the first version, said, we asked from the Reish of the Mishnah. The Reish of the Mishnah said you have a stone in the pumpkin that we said that you could, it's not muktzah, it's not a basis. Why isn't it muktzah? Why isn't it basis? It's not difficult, because there you wedged it in. So it's like part of the wall. Here you just put on top of the barrel. That's not going to make it part of the barrel. It's going to be muktzah. Then the second version, which said that by just placing it does become a cover, asked from the second half of that statement. We said, and if you didn't tie it on, you can't fill it up. Why not? Why even if you didn't tie it on? Just placing, you're saying it becomes a kli. So I said, no, it's not difficult, because since you didn't wedge it in, so you're nullifying because it's going to float all around. That's worse than just putting on top of a barrel. There it's going to stay over there. There it is going to become part of the kli, but by the pumpkin it's actually worse, and therefore there it's not going to be part of the kli, and it's going to be muktzah. And the Gemara said that these two different interpretations in Rabbi Yechanan go according to what's called a tamayu, by a different version of Rabbi Yechanan's statement, in the story with Rabbi. There was a row of stones, or one version has it that it was a row of beams, or the other one has it that it was these sticks that are used by the sailors. Be that as it may, Rebbe had told him before Shabbos, go out and think about these stones, and we could sit in them tomorrow. Now, Rabbi Yechanan says no, he didn't just say think about them. He said that he required an action. What was the action that he required? So one version has it out of Rabami, that he says go ahead and make them into piles and organize them into benches. That's Rabami L'Shitasa that he holds, yes. The reason why you have to be malamdim to make them into boards is because a stone, or whatever they were, or piles of beams, they cannot become a kli just by placing it, just by doing a minimal action. No, you have to do a bona fide action. That would be what's required. That's not enough just anacha. And the other version, Abasi says, no, he just said to wipe it down. That's a minimal action. That's the same machlek as we have regarding over here that we said, regarding what's the halacha. If you just place it, does it make it worse? Because placing is not enough, it's a small action. Then it becomes a basis. Oh no, yes, small action by just placing it actually would make it a cover, and it would make it not muktzah anymore. Then we continued with the halacha. The Mishnah says regarding the vine that's attached. So he said it sounds like, but if you don't attach it, then not. So that sounds like Rav Shimon Gamliel, who says that the branches, that just by placing it over there it's enough. So no, it could even be like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Why? Because by the hard branches you don't have to tie it, even though over there you took it for firewood and then you just changed your mind for sitting, because we're talking about in our Mishnah that this vine is still attached to the ground. So, and it's not a problem of using something attached to the ground because it's less than 3 tvachim, but since it's attached, you need to have a stronger action, and it's not enough just by thinking about it. And Shimon would agree to that you have to tie it on. Or you could even say, no, it's not even attached to the ground. But by the case of the grapevine, it's a concern that you might come to break it to make it according to the size. If you attach it, then you know it's already part of that. You're not going to come to break it. Shimon would agree that you have to tie it on over there in that case. And then we finished off with the case of the Mishnah of the window shutter, which we said Evan agrees that you're not allowed to make initially a temporary structure, even though it's temporary initially on Yom Tov and not on Shabbos. So all Machlekes was regarding adding on its temporary structure. The list says you're not allowed to add on. Therefore, it's only if it's literally hanging and not on the ground that it's attached. Someone says no, you could add on to oil hours, so you could take a piece of board and close up the window because it's only a temporary closing, which is a haisafa of an oil arai that's permitted to be done on Shabbos and B'shur on Yom Tov, to any time of hosting this.